Okay, good morning everyone. Good to see a full screen there. If we could go through the apologies of absence, please.
Okay, we've had apologies from Councillors Brown, Lister and Thomas.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, thanks. Sarah, do you want to do the roll call, please?
Yeah, I'll do the roll call now. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Ali.
I'm present.
Good morning. Councillor Spencer.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes, I can see you here in the room. Councillor Hussey.
Present.
Thank you, Councillor Hussey. Councillor Jarvie. I can't see Councillor Jarvie online. Councillor Molson.
Present.
Thank you. Good morning. Councillor Morgans.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Norton.
Here.
Good morning. Councillor Shaw.
In attendance, thank you. Good morning.
Councillor Smith.
Yep, I'm here.
Excellent. Good morning. And Councillor Williams. I can't see Councillor Williams online. Okay, that concludes the roll call. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. Any member of the declaration of interest, please? No? Okay, thanks. Item 4, Chairperson's announcements. I do not have any announcements. So we'll go into item 5, receive the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 7th of February 2022. Just go through any matters in writing, please. None? So we'll move to record, please.
Yes,
I'll move that.
I
Yes,
move
Chair.
Second.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, report for information. Annual report for the Works and Finance Asset and Performance Management Scrutiny Group. Okay, page 7.
Thank you. So I'll take us through that report this morning. So this is the annual report that advises, first of all, the FA&PM committee, and then in turn will advise the Fire Authority in its entirety of the work that has been undertaken by the FA&PM Scrutiny Group. So I'll just take members through Appendix 1, which is the report itself, where we talk about the purpose of the Scrutiny Group, and then the financial responsibilities that the group take on, and the fact that you scrutinise the medium-term financial strategy, the revenue and capital budget setting for 22-23. And also there were discussions then around the budget consultation about how that occurs, and then also reviewing the adoption or the adoption rather of the SIPFA Financial Management Code, and there was some scrutiny and discussion around the potential actions on there. The Scrutiny Group also has a number of asset management responsibilities, and in the course of the year you've received the strategies for the property asset strategy, the fleet asset management plan, the operational and personal equipment strategy, and also the ICT strategy. And then another area of work for the Scrutiny Group themselves is the appointment of the member champions. So we were lucky enough for Councillor Smith to take on land and buildings and be our member champion for that, and also Councillor Williams to continue as the operational and personal issue equipment member champion. In the course of this municipal year, we did have 2 vacancies within the member champions, and they were deferred until the new municipal year, and it was discussed that the member champions would be allocated or agreed at the annual general meeting, which will be occurring in June 22. The Scrutiny Group also done work on the Scrutiny Committee reform proposals, and as well as looking at them yourselves, there were then recommendations that went through the various committees of the authority after that, and is a piece of work that will continue again into the next municipal year. You then had further areas of scrutiny where you scrutinised the departmental risk register, and also reviewed the initial draft annual governance statement for 21-22, which will be embodied within the statement of accounts. And there are two following items of work for the scrutiny group today. The first being, the next one being the Future Trends Report 2022. Now, apologies members, there is a typo in Appendix 1 which I have identified today, and I will make sure that is changed when this gets reported through the FA&PM committee next week. And the last item there, 6.4, is the draft annual report for the discharge of your terms of reference as the Finance, Asset and Performance Management Scrutiny Group. So the recommendation for this paper is that I'm asking members to consider the report and suggest any necessary amendments prior to this being reported to the FA&PM Management Committee.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any questions to Sarah, please? No? That's right on there.
Not a question, just a comment, Chairman, that members have trusted me with property services, etc., and I am extremely conscious of the fact that I have not done that which I would have wished to have done. So I apologise, members. I might sometime get an organised life.
Thanks very much. Any further observations? Someone move, someone second, please. Accept the report.
I would move.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you both. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, future trends, is it?
Yes.
Yep.
So Adam Hibbard is going to be delivering the Future Trends report for the scrutiny group. Good morning, Adam.
Morning, Sarah. Morning, everybody. Let me just share my screen with you. Okay, everybody should be able to see PowerPoint now. So a little bit of background here. Future Trends work is where we look at global, national, regional trends based on existing research and predictive research to look at the areas that are most likely to have challenges for us as a service over the next kind of 10, 15, 20 years. This report builds on an initial report we did 2-3 years ago, and then a report that looked at the impact that COVID was having on our communities. Last January, I think we presented that one. Since we have started this Future Trends work, the Welsh Government has released a couple of major publications themselves. So we shall just quickly look at what they are, how they relate to the work we've been doing. So the Welsh Government has released its National Plan 2040 report. So it's looking at, again, existing trends, future goals that the Welsh Government has, and its top-level actions. And last year, it also released its own Future Trends report, Future Trends 2021, where it looked at 6 key themes based on a large range of existing research, and also looked at some predictive research as well. So they were people and population inequalities, planetary health and limits, technology, public finances, and public sector demand and digital. Now, what we've decided to do is focus this iteration of our Future Trends work on those 6 key themes that the Welsh Government looked at in their Future Trends 2021 report. So this presentation today is going to cover those six areas. If we go into the next slide, the background that we always in the major context at the moment we have to bear in mind is that we are still coming towards the end of the pandemic. Pandemic's turning into an endemic, and there are challenges and priorities that the Welsh Government has outlined as we move forward away from the pandemic and into the new way of living and the new way of working post COVID-19. So all of the elements that I'm going to be talking through today have this in the background. And this slide here then looks at how we place our future trends work again within the broader context of Welsh Government acts and research and future policy and decision making. So at the top, we've got, this all stems back from Wellbeing and Future Generations Act 2015, and then that kind of that acts as an umbrella piece of work, and then under that we have those future Wales National Plan reports, the future trends Welsh Government reports. They're integrated into regional local development plans, and then there's our future trends work. And what we plan to do after this report is integrate our future trends work, which is connected to all of those other elements that I've just mentioned, and see how they are going to influence our plans at a unitary authority level and at a community level and station for the CRMPs that each station produces. So we're getting to a stage now where this future trends work is maturing, that it is going to be used and influence on a more, excuse me, on a more real basis, if you like. It's not just theoretical information that we're providing at the top level. It's actually going to be used to influence how stations are developing their plans for the future. So if we go through to the 6 key themes, and I'll run through some highlights of these before providing you with an overview at the end. So the first one, people and population. These are the main themes main trends that we're expecting to see over the next few years. So, and a lot of these will be familiar to all of you on the call. So we're currently undergoing slowing of population growth. That means that fertility rates are declining, mortality rates are declining, which causes a slowing population growth. But people are living longer, so as well as there being a slowing population growth, we have an aging population. Now that is going to cause some stresses, particularly on health services and on public sector, as the pensionable age population increases over the next few years. The working age population is not increasing at the same rate. So we can see by these charts here. So that's the pensionable age going up over the next 20 years. The working age population goes up slightly, but nowhere near as much. So there's fewer people who can contribute through work and through income national insurance, etc., income tax national insurance, who can contribute to the public sector finances that will care for those in the older population. And what we're also seeing is that in terms of the health profile, more people are living with chronic conditions, and they have morbidities, which is basically they have more than one chronic condition as they get older, which requires more care. But there are fewer people to provide the finances for that care in the next few years. Other elements of people and population that we've looked at are that there's going to be an increase in housing demand. and the Welsh Government has set out some key goals in terms of the number of new homes, the number of affordable homes that are going to be required. And I suppose one of the main things to look out for there is that new housing is going to have to take into account the aging profile of people that are living in those houses. So types of homes, whether the houses are linked to social and healthcare services in the local communities, and generally acknowledging the need to understand where people who are living longer actually want to live in the future. In terms of migration, because of the slow in population growth, migration is going to have a little bit more of a bigger impact on our overall population than it has in recent years. That said, we are expecting more people to migrate into Wales rather than out of Wales, although that net migration is going to contract over the next 20 years. We expect to see more migrants coming from non-EU countries over the next 20 years. And we also expect there to be a small net migration of people aged 22 to 30. That raises a few concerns in terms of a potential brain drain of people that have gone through school, college, university, but no longer working within our region, going elsewhere for employment. And one of the other main pillars of the Welsh Government's people and population forecast is that it put a lot of emphasis on continuing to grow the Welsh language nationally and in South Wales. So they'd placed a target of 1 million native speakers in Wales by 2050. That figure is going to be exceeded much sooner than that. It's likely to be exceeded by 2030. It's going to be more than 1 million native Welsh speakers. And the forecasts beyond 2030 and beyond 2050 are very healthy within research. Welsh language is expected to be one of the fastest growing smaller global languages over the next 20, 30, 40 years. And there's some research that is cited. One thing I should have probably mentioned in sharing this report is that in the notes pages underneath each slide, there are footnotes and links to where you can read more about where this research comes from. So there's some interesting studies there I think there's one interesting one by Canterbury University in New Zealand about the growth of the Welsh language in particular. In response to what we expect to see in terms of people and population trends, as a service we have already enacted some new things. So we've introduced enhanced home safety checks, we've set up high-rise working groups, we've provided extra support to other agencies, particularly in light of COVID-19. We've set up more support for employees with the Mental Health Project and the Trauma Screening Programme in particular, and participated in the Blue Light Programme. And we continue to place a lot of emphasis on engaging with our communities in Welsh language, both in our employee cohort and in the broader communities that we serve. And we acknowledge that there are still a lot of challenges and actions that we will need to undertake in the future to align ourselves with the change in people and population that we have in our community. So we'll go through to the next theme, inequalities. We can see that inequality has widened in the last 40 years. This chart up here shows that the UK pre-tax income share of the bottom 50% has declined, whereas for the top 10% increased and increased by a larger degree. So there's been slow progress recently on poverty reduction in Wales, and as with a lot of elements of the things that we're looking at in this future trends work, the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated these existing structural, economic, and social and environmental inequalities. The labour market measures brought in during the pandemic to aid people, furlough scheme, for example, those were positive introductions at the time, but that support no longer exists. And a couple of other elements here. Child and pensioner poverty in Wales has actually increased, and that isn't expected to change in the short to medium term. And we have seen that there's a new group of households that previously weren't near the poverty line pre-pandemic, but now they are on that poverty line or living in poverty. And I think everybody is obviously very aware that we are going through a cost of living crisis now, which isn't likely to change in the next year or two. We haven't gone into detail on that cost of living crisis within this iteration of the Future Trends work, but it's certainly something that we will look at in the next Future Trends work as more research becomes available as to the actual real life impact that the cost of living crisis is having on people. Likewise, I should mention that we don't really look at the Russian invasion of Ukraine in any detail in this report, because it's still pretty early days there, even though it looks like it is going to have potential issues for our communities over the next period. We don't know exactly what they are yet. So in the next iteration of this report, it is likely that there will be more information about that, the impact that invasion is going to have, both on the makeup of our communities, how that changes with Ukrainian migrants coming in, how that affects housing, social needs, language needs, and again how that feeds back to what we do operationally as a service, but then more broadly the impact that rising fuel prices is having on the communities that we serve as well. So we'll look into that a bit more detail in the next iteration of the Future Trends work. There's a little mention of educational inequality that has widened since pre-pandemic levels. So there is a lot of research out there now that has evidenced that pupils from disadvantaged backgrounds have lost ground on pupils from non-disadvantaged backgrounds in the last 2 years. One example being that there's research that is cited here. Pupils in year 1 and 2 from disadvantaged backgrounds in the UK are now 7 months behind their more advantaged peers in reading and mathematics. And there's also evidence that I've cited in the more detailed report that accompanies this PowerPoint that those impacts that we've seen over the past 2 years on those disadvantaged pupils are likely to have a long-term impact on their educational results, and their job prospects, and therefore their economic prospects over the next 20 years. Unemployment has been decreasing. However, it's not decreasing equally across our region. So it's been rising actually in Blaenau Gwent. It's been decreasing in a lot of other areas. But the pandemic, and now we're coming out of the pandemic, there's evidence that long-term unemployment is actually not decreasing, and it's higher now than it has been for the past 7 years. So the top headline for unemployment is pretty good, but when you look into the detail, short-term unemployment is decreasing, long-term unemployment is not. So again, people who had those existing inequalities within our society, they have been hardest hit in terms of their economic status and their job status since the pandemic started. In response to these inequality trends, we have already put some actions in place. So we've made contact with local food banks, particularly to engage in the most vulnerable individuals within our communities. But again, we are aware that there are challenges upcoming, and we're placing a lot of emphasis on adhering to the socio-economic duty principles in the future, in terms of how we decide on helping to reduce the inequalities associated with socio-economic disadvantage. So we look at planetary health and limits. This is, generally speaking, environment and climate. The overall picture for climate change projections that have been reported pre-pandemic, those haven't really changed. So what we expect to see are an increased chance of milder, wetter winters and hotter, drier summers. Sea levels still going to rise. And as we've seen over the past few years, the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events has increased. Over the next 20 years, it's expected that South Wales will be in line with the global temperature increase of 1.5 degrees. And over that period of time, there is going to be an increased energy demand. Now, the energy sector is going to shift. Maybe some of that shift is going to be speeded up by what's happening with the global energy markets at the moment with oil and gas. But there's going to be a big shift towards renewable, and that shift towards renewable is going to increase the electricity demand in Wales by over the next 30 years. And it's likely that that electricity demand could double. The Welsh government has outlined that it expects that electricity consumption generated by renewables will increase by 70% over the next 10 years. And that shift to renewable production is going to have an impact on the job market. So there's going to be tens of thousands more jobs, which we'll mention in a bit, that are going to be opened up within the renewable sector, and also emerging technologies sector, which leads us on to change in transport use and demand. So at the moment, the UK transport system is moving into a period of almost unprecedented change. That's driven by the automation and electrification of vehicles. And that trend can have positive impacts. So decrease in emissions has a positive environmental impact. And it's likely that automation of vehicles is going to increase accessibility to road vehicles for users who don't currently use road vehicles. But then that's going to lead to an increase in road use as well. And as we're aware, there's also been an increasing trend towards more remote and home working. You might think that those two things are contradictory. So more home working means less traffic. It does at the moment in peak times, but whether that will continue in the long term, we are unsure. And one other thing to mention here is food security. So as climate changes and we are reliant on imports of crops that are being adversely affected by changes in local climate, then food costs are expected to rise. And as I write here, Wales is currently reliant on food imports. Food insecurity felt among households is worse now than it was pre-pandemic. And again, outlined at the bottom here, we have already introduced a wide range of actions, including partnerships and the developing schemes to support our carbon reduction plan. I'll highlight a couple of other things here. We've put 26 staff through carbon literacy course, and we've conducted feasibility studies around reducing our water waste on headquarters by reusing water for our vehicle fleet wash facility. But again, we are very aware that we face more potential issues in the future. So it's likely that climate change is going to increase the number of grass fires with those hotter, drier summers. But it's also going to increase flooding with the advent of increased extreme weather events. So that will have a knock-on impact on grass fires and water rescues and flooding, and obviously we know that the road use and road demand is going to change in the future. Moving on to technology, we are seeing a shift towards, as I mentioned, more automated, digitized economy in Wales. It's what we call the fourth industrial revolution. It's the digital industrial revolution. Now that highlights that there is a digital divide in Wales, and that does remain, and that digital divide is exacerbated again by social and economic inequalities for those who are digitally excluded. And it's likely that people from more disadvantaged backgrounds, digitally excluded, and the people who are in the older age bracket in our society are also more likely to be digitally excluded. Artificial intelligence and new industries, they're going to have a much bigger contribution to UK economic growth over the next few years. The workplace is going to change, so some new technologies are going to be a substitute for human labour. The ONS has done a study on what impact automation, new technology is going to have on specific roles and tasks within jobs, and again, that's footnoted in the bottom of this report. That research cited that it is women, young people from ethnic minorities, and part-time workers are at greatest risk of losing some of their job roles to automation. The post-COVID-19 job market, number of jobs in the UK is actually higher than pre-pandemic levels, but employers have found it quite hard to fill roles. Most of the employers who found it hard to fill roles are employers that don't have roles available in the high salary bracket. And the reason why they find it hard is because well, there are various reasons. But most recruiters cite the fact that workers are now seeking greater flexibility in their working conditions in terms of location and schedule, seeking better pay. Many have looked at a career change or a career break, and many have also decided on reflection of the past 2 years that they're going to take early retirement rather than continuing to work or to look elsewhere for work. Another area that the Welsh Government Future Trends report focused on is cybersecurity. Now, cybersecurity threats have been increasing globally. Those are expected to rise in the future. There's expected to be an increase in nation-state-sponsored cyber attacks, but cyber attacks are expected to increase on supply chains, which has an impact on our procurement and on mobile devices. And in terms of our finance and procurement, it is likely that we will not be dissimilar from other organisations in the fact that we will have to increase our cyber insurance and adoption, and cyber insurance premiums are going to cost more in the future. Now, in response to changing technology trends, as this call is an example, we've increased our use of video conferencing. We've introduced 24/7 health and safety accident and near-miss reporting system. We've implemented technology upgrades on our operational mobile devices. So there's lots of actions that we have already undertaken. We recognise that there's more to do, specifically the changing workplace and in this digitised society that we will increasingly be living in, and that obviously has an impact on how we communicate safety messaging to our communities in the future. There's two other sections to look at. So public finances. There's been a slowdown of UK economic growth post-COVID. The budget announcement last week highlighted that. Commodity prices have risen, but long-term implications of those are uncertain, as I mentioned earlier. But in the short term, economic growth is expected to slow down. And again, in the short term, increases to energy prices, they have a pervasive influence on all aspects of daily life. Short-term stresses on resource budgets. The deficit at the end of this year, as announced, I think, in the budget, was lower than the forecast, but it's still a lot higher than it was pre-COVID. This highlights over here, it's 115 billion more UK deficit than it was pre-pandemic levels. So all of that has a massive impact on public finances. In the future, as we mentioned earlier, the non-working population is expected to grow more than the working age population. So again, you have fewer people financing through tax, national insurance contributions, etc., financing the care and social services required for the increase in the non-working age population. This non-working age population chart down here, that's not just pensionable age, that includes anybody who's under 16 and anybody who's over 65. So it's not just older age care services, it's also care services for children and young families. In response to to these trends. Actually, I should mention that with regards to the working age population not growing as much as the non-working age population, and the issues that various organisations have had in terms of acquiring labour, there are some things that organisations can focus on in terms of building more resilience for their employee cohort in the future, and that is a focus on employing people from underrepresented groups currently. So employing more younger people of working age, employing more women, employing more immigrants, and putting in place schemes to target those groups to bring more of those people into the workforce. In response, we have ran female focus groups on becoming female firefighters. We've used new engagement channels to attract more women and more people from ethnic minorities into the role of a firefighter. Recently in the Whole Time campaign, which yielded positive results. So the proportion of applicants that were female and the proportion of applicants from ethnic minorities both increased this year compared to last year, helped by the fact that we had ran these female focus groups and used new channels to engage in different populations within our society. The last theme, public sector demand and digital. So linked to all of the things that we mentioned, there's going to be an increase in demand for health and social care. The number of people most likely to require publicly funded services is going to increase. And as I mentioned before, the working age population to fund those services is not going to increase at the same rate. As well as that, there's going to be a reduction in care provision by adult children as the retirement age is extended. And there's going to be an increase in older spouse carers who are living with chronic health conditions and disabilities themselves, whilst also caring for a partner. There's going to be an increase in demand for digital services. We've seen the pandemic has sped up digital transformation across the public sector. That speed of change is likely to continue. There's going to be a requirement to deliver more electronic and mobile services in the future that provide informational and educational resources, and also act as touch points for the public to engage with us. And as I've mentioned previously, we need to recognise that there are those that are digitally excluded. So there is a negative correlation between digital use and exclusion. The digitally excluded are least likely to be connected, to be aware of services, or to have the necessary digital literacy to make meaningful use of those services. But new digital services can positively engage and interact with people from marginalised groups in society to benefit them. So what I mean by that is that the digitalisation of services enables organisations in the public sector to provide more bespoke services to different cohorts within society. In response to the change in digital demand recently, we've launched our new self-assessment toolkit to the public on our website, but we also recognise that there is going to be increase in digital demand for services in the future, and we are also very mindful that there are those who are digitally excluded, and our community safety work cannot rely on existing digital services and pathways only. to cover everybody in society. So if I go back up and just summarize the key headlines here as I wrap this presentation up. Global events have had implications on economic growth, supply chains, energy prices. Those events, such as the COVID pandemic, have affected standard of living and exacerbated existing inequalities within society. The population in Wales is going to grow, but it's going to grow slow over the next 20 years, and it's going to grow. The age profile of the population is getting older. The working age population is growing slower than the non-working age population, which pushes increased stresses on public finances for care and social services. There's going to be an increase in housing demand, specifically a need for more affordable housing. Poverty is likely to increase in the short term. The educational gap between those from disadvantaged and non-disadvantaged backgrounds has increased, and that's likely to have lasting impacts over the next 15 to 20 years. The climate change projections that everybody's aware of are still the same. So those milder, wetter winters, hotter, dry summers, rising sea levels, more flooding, more grass fires, more an increased frequency of extreme events. Food insecurity is likely to rise, again linked to climate change and the cost of living crisis. There's going to be a shift towards more digitisation within the Welsh economy. So that raises questions about who is digitally excluded. It also has an impact on the makeup of the job market. So there are going to be new jobs out there, but some existing jobs are going to be taken by automated services. Cyber security threats pose an increasing danger. One of the biggest changes that we're going to see is obviously the transport system. So that's the electrification and automation of vehicles over the next few years. And the job market has changed since before the pandemic. So in the future, working patterns are likely to become more flexible in terms of location and hours as the demand from employees changes as to what they want out of a career. So I admit I've kind of rushed through a lot of that. There's a lot of detail within these slides. Again, within the footnotes, you can go back to finding out where the research comes from. There's an accompanying Word document with this PowerPoint presentation that goes into each of these 6 key themes in even greater detail should you want to look at that as well. But I'll open the floor back to the chair for questions.
Thank you, Adrian, for that very interesting report. I must admit, when I first read through it, I saw a lot of it, or read a lot of it, and I thought it was a little bit on the depressing side. But you stated the facts, and your presentation has made it very, very interesting, which I thank you for. Members, any questions to Adrian, please?
Yes,
Rod?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Adam, for a very sobering report. I absolutely agree with the Chair. It somewhat sets you back, frankly. These are, to say the least, challenging times. Could I ask 2 questions, really? First of all, is this report, can we have the PowerPoint presentation and report sent to us by email? Because we've only got the printed document at the moment. That would be very useful. And is it okay for us to share this report? I think a lot of people would be very interested in the findings, but I wouldn't want to do so without permission of the Fire Authority.
Councillor Shaw, I can answer that one for you. Yes, we can definitely make sure that the PowerPoint and the Word document are shared with members. And Geraint, I see no reason why members can't share this report with their localities and appropriate groups. No issue whatsoever.
No, it's perfectly fine to share. Possibly the one point just to add really to that is, if sharing, is the bits of note in terms of the actions that we take in as a service. Obviously, this is a very forward-looking report in terms of the future trends, and it's just reassuring, I think, for members in terms of the links with all the plans that we've got in place to address some of these areas, and it links through to everything from our improvement plan, our carbon reduction plan, our people plan. They're all part of the actions that are mentioned throughout this report.
It's an incredibly good example, frankly. It takes all the global, I think there was once a term global local. It takes all the global themes that we're being battered with at the moment and applies them to the fire service, which is extraordinarily well crafted, I think. But I think the general message in the report, frankly, we kept it to ourselves. I think we would be doing a disservice. Other people need to know the information that we've garnished here, that Adam's provided with us, for us. Because it's sobering, to say the least.
Any other member, please? Any other member question of Adrian? The first one.
Councillor Smith.
Val, you want to come in, please?
Thank you very much. No, it's a great report. Thank you very much for whoever compiled, and thank you for the presentation, because you read something, but then when it's actually talked through as well, it gives it, I don't know, registers better. It's an excellent report. One small question. When recruiting for the fire authority, and we try to recruit more women for the active role of firefighter, and we have a problem in that sphere, if we advertise clerical administrative positions, do we have a better response from women? I presume we do. So it's a very specific role, that of firefighter, that we cannot attract women, but the rest of the force is okay.
Yes, Caroline, if I start an answer, I'll hand over to you. Yes, Councillor Smith. So engaging female firefighters has always been a challenge for us as a service, and the way in which we're modifying our recruitment approach does appear to be providing some positive action in that regard. Similarly, trying to recruit male control firefighters and control operators has been a challenge as well, because that traditionally has been seen as a more female role. And with regards to roles within headquarters, we do have a fair mix, but generally administrative roles seem to be favoured by more female occupants, although they're opened up generally. We are doing a lot of actions within our recruitment and our interviewing processes to ensure that we have gender balance when we're interviewing for roles, which is a positive action that we've taken over the last few years to make sure that we have as broad a group of people engaged in the recruitment process as we can.
It's interesting about lack of response for the call responders from males. I just thought there's another thing that intrigues me. Lots of concern, obviously, about energy provision. That Tidal Power seems to have gone completely out of the equation. With you rarely, if ever, hear a reference. This is not specific to the fire authority. It's just that we've got water lapping around the edges of our island, and to me, it seems a bit non-productive not to use. Thank you very much, and whoever compiled that report, congratulations.
Well, you brought up a very interesting aspect there about tidal power. I can remember when I joined the Vale Glamorgan many years ago, there was going to be something about the Severn Barrage, and there was a large comprehensive document prepared, and I think buried somewhere in the archives. It'd be interesting if we could dig that up, maybe. I don't know if you any.
I can recall a lot of debate about tidal power and being pretty well informed by somebody who was very involved in that scheme, But I've always felt the second bridge was built in the wrong place and it was the wrong thing to build. But still, that's just me.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other member there, please? No? Adrian, I'd like to ask a question. I'm in the room with 3 young ladies, far off pensionable age. How will these trends affect their pension? I don't want to know the ins and outs of their finances, but I'm rather concerned for the younger element in the UK, especially here in South Wales.
Well, obviously that the specifics around what people are likely to get as a pension in the future, people who start working now are not available. But in all likelihood, people who enter the job market now in their 20s are going to have to work into their 70s before they can get their state pension. The state pension is going to be less than the state pension is for everybody on this call, for those individuals, unfortunately.
Great, thank you very much. So when I was born in 1944, it was a good time to be born. Thank you.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Somebody else that did it?
Geraint Thomas.
Geraint?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on that specific, I mean, when you mentioned the 3 officers in the room with you, obviously they are part of the local government pension scheme if they signed up to that, and that is a funded scheme, and obviously they'll be part of the scheme agreements that are in place currently. I mean, the change which Adam touched on is obviously as the years are rolling on, the normal pensionable age or sort of retirement age will be pushed up and up, and we've seen that obviously move from 65 to 66, 67, and as Adam said, it's likely to sort of be into the 70s in the future. So, but hopefully, as I say, there are protections in place for all of our current officers who are members of a funded scheme.
Okay, fine. No more questions. We go on to item. Oh, it's fine, well then. Yeah, count someone move and someone second that. Acceptance of the report, please.
I'll second.
Right.
Second.
Fine. Okay. Thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sarah. Item 8, forward work programme 21 and 22.
So just to advise members, I do apologise, the forward work programme hadn't been updated since the meeting on the 7th of February. So those 2 items in your papers should have been greyed out because they were on the agenda for the 7th of February. And there were just 2 remaining items, which was the draft annual report for the discharge of terms of reference for the Scrutiny Group and the future trends report. So that concludes our forward work programme for the year.
Okay, do we have a proposal, second to that?
Not for that one, we don't need to.
No, okay, fine. Right.
Okay. Excellent.
Regarding item 9, in terms, to consider any item business of the chairperson deemed urgent, I do not have anything at all. So with that, I would thank you all for being in attendance today. Thank you for members here in the on the screen, and also members of staff here. And hopefully we'll see most of you again after the 5th of May. Thank you very much. Close the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mark.
Bye, everyone.